Welcome to Surviving Roots, the podcast where we journey through the complexities of our emotions together. I'm your host, Carrie Fund, and I'm here to guide you on a path of self-discovery, understanding, and healing. In each episode, we'll explore a range of emotions and experiences, from navigating grief and trauma to managing stress and anxiety. Through candid conversations, expert insights, and practical strategies, we'll uncover the tools you need to navigate life's emotional landscape with resilience and grace. So, let's embark on this transformative journey together. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself this time. This podcast is for you. Today's guest is Chris Hunter, a remarkable entrepreneur known for his monumental achievements in the beverage industry. Chris first made headlines as the co-founder of Four Loko, a wildly successful alcoholic beverage. However, his journey wasn't without its challenges, including the significant setback of being ousted by his own partners. Undeterred, Chris pivoted and co-founded Koia, a company that's revolutionizing the plant-based beverage market. Most recently, Chris has released his gripping memoir, Blackout Punch, an entrepreneur's journey from chaos. In this book, he bravely shares his quest for power, his struggles with masculinity, and his ultimate path to self-discovery. Beyond his business ventures, Chris is also a dedicated father to 3 boys, balancing his professional wins with his commitment to his family. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So great having you. You know, we know each other, our families know each other. Our youngest ones have the sweetest friendship that is like
They sure do.
admirable. So I know you as this rock star father and husband. And today I really want to dive into your background, your business, and this amazing book that you wrote.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So can you share with everyone listening a bit about your background and what inspired you to become this entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and if you're not familiar with that area, it's a very blue collar steel mill town. Like the aspirational bar at the time of me growing up was to get a job at General Motors or at one of the steel mills, right? So it's just I give that context because it was very as a gritty town, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad I grew up there. But for me, and in our family, I quickly realized that money was the inhibiting factor to options. And so at an early age, not really crystallizing that, but kind of intuitively understanding it, I started looking for ways to make money. And so I was the kid who, sold gum on the bus, or maybe a little bit more aggressively sold bootleg, sunglasses and shirts. I was just always fascinated by the idea that I could kind of make my own rules and figure out ways to make money that were not the monotonous 9 to 5, show up, do the same thing day in and day out. And I never knew what that would mean. Like I didn't really have a model. I mean, I had one uncle who was a general contractor, so he was the
Mhm.
closest to, he was an entrepreneur, but the closest that I ever saw. I just knew I wanted to do something on my own. And so that expressed itself throughout my life in different ways. When I went to college, I first went to Miami of Ohio, in Oxford, and that ended up not being a fit for me, but I transferred to Ohio State, and I brought this event from Miami of Ohio to Ohio State that I threw with this big haul and made money off of that, or I started promoting nightclubs. And so it was just always like, what can I do that interests me, that seems unique? And that really started me along the entrepreneurial path.
So you're like a natural born hustler.
That's the way I put it. I don't know. Some people connotate a hustler with a negative image, but look,
Not
that's
at
the
all.
reality. I'm a natural born hustler.
Not at all. And are you instilling that in your kids?
Absolutely. I'll give you a funny example. So, my youngest, Ashton, he wanted something that his brothers had got. I don't remember what it was. And we empower the kids with their own bank accounts. We use this thing called Greenlight, where they have their own accounts. It's broken out into save and spend, and we try to carve out a little that's to give as well. But they're responsible for earning their own money and spending their own money, as long as it's within our rules. And it's so interesting to see, because he realized he didn't have enough money for whatever it was that he wanted.
Mhm.
And that realization as a 6-year-old was fascinating to watch, because he started thinking about, how can I make money? And he asked us, and we started giving him ideas without telling him what to do. and he realized his brothers were playing in a flag football championship game last spring, I guess it would be. And we're in Miami, so it's really hot. And he said, I'm gonna make lemonade and go person to person and sell it."
Oh
And he
my
earned the
gosh.
money he needed that
Go
day to buy what he
Ashton.
wanted. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing. And you can't say no to that face. I
right,
can only
exactly.
imagine what he was charging.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Oh my gosh. Look, he's already in the beverage business like your his dad.
There you go. There you go. I'm trying to broaden their perspectives. Beverage game is tough. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's not lucrative, but like I don't want them to be pigeonholed into whatever it is that I've done.
Well, that's amazing. You're an inspiration to them. So, tell us about Four Loco and that experience in this whole like being ousted, like because surviving roots is all about turning pain or setbacks into power and our potential. So, can you give us a little background on that business and that experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with, with time and space, you have the ability to reflect, and what I feel like happens, at least it happened for me, is you realize that everyone has a part in everything that happens, right? And so while at the moment I felt very much like something happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no part in it, and I was pissed off and all that kind of stuff. And in retrospect, there were roles I played intentionally, unintentionally, that led to essentially a separation of a partnership. The backstory is, out of college, as I mentioned, I did nightclub promotions. I got my first job selling vodka for a startup company, and so that's how I understood and learned the industry essentially on
Mm-hmm.
somebody else's dime. And I was 24 years old. I was drinking plenty of Red Bull and vodkas and Jaeger bombs, and so the idea of caffeine and alcohol was not lost on me. And I just saw an opportunity. And so I called two buddies from college who lightly knew each other, but they had different skill sets. And we started this company. And very naively, we set it up where majority rules, and egotistically, I was like, well, I'm kind of the center that brought them together. I'll always be in the majority. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that ended up not happening. But over the years, life just changed. And we had not thought that through, or at least I hadn't. I was married, I had kids. One of my partners was single, one of my partners was married. We lived in different places, we had different aspirations and goals. We just grew apart. And, unfortunately, I think we weren't mature enough to sit down and have this conversation. And I'll speak for myself, I probably wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
about the fact that we were growing apart. And it just got very contentious to where we were fighting this internal battle. We fought many external battles. We had to build the company. That was an external battle. We had to fight off all these government agencies that tried to sue us. We had to fight off these frivolous, class action lawsuits. But when those went away, it left a lot of space for us to fight these internal battles that maybe were always there underlying, but there was never bandwidth for them, right? And so when that started to happen, it kind of became an elevated kind of ego thing. Well, I'm in charge. I know I'm in charge. I'm going to do it this way, and it
Yeah.
just was dividing the company. And when I look back, I say, look, something happened to me. I didn't get to make the decision, but I knew what needed to happen. And the
Mm-hmm.
lesson for me was like, when I know what needs to happen, if I don't take control and make it happen on my terms, it leaves it open to happen on someone else's. And that's ultimately what happened. I woke up one day, I was fired from the company, I was removed from the board. I still own my share of the company. In some ways, that's good. In some ways, that's bad.
Yeah.
But it was really a wake up call because I had attached my identity to that company and to what I had built. Um, and in retrospect, it was a blessing because I was able to detach from that and, realize that I was more than just the Four Loco guy.
See, I think that's so amazing in your story. And I wasn't asking about it just to like go back into background because you've done so much and you're doing so much now. But it's like so many people get stuck in that. Why is this happening to me? And then their negative self-talk is like, I failed, or this isn't working. This isn't what I'm supposed to do. And they spiral. And you didn't do that. You literally said, instead of like, why is this happening? It's like almost like, what can I learn from this? And then you moved forward, and now there's Koia. And I would love to know more about Koia because you are revolutionizing this sector in this industry. And the interesting thing about you and your family is that you really do live the lifestyle. Like, I've been in
Yeah.
your home, I know your wife. Like, when I think see food dyes, I'm like, I need Melanie Hunter, the food dye police. Like, she can help me with my kids. Like, you're not drinking Gatorade. You not only are in this industry like with these healthy like plant-based drinks, but you guys really do live the lifestyle. So why Koia? Like, what did you take from the Four Loco experience, and what made you go into the plant-based drinks from alcohol?
Yeah, so I'll go back real quick, and I think you summarized it accurately, but that's a very time compressed view.
Yeah.
Like I had the normal reaction of I'm pissed off and why is this happening to me and anger towards others and whatever. But over space and time, I started to look back and realize like I think everything in life that happens, you can choose one of two things. You can choose to let that define you and live in that, whatever it
Mhm.
is. I had these issues when I was a kid, or my parents weren't, whatever, or I'm fired from my company. Or you can look at it and say, what role did I have? What lesson, and where can I go from here? And
Mhm.
after a while, not immediately, I got to where do I go from here? And so that ultimately led to Koia. The interesting kind of like light bulb that went off was actually pre me being fired within Fusion Project, which is the
Wow.
parent company of Four Loko. And we had this cost saving exercise where we were going through all of our different ingredients, and we had this president of the company at the time, and he made this joke that really stuck with me and still sticks with me to this day. He said one of the line items was high fructose corn syrup. And we bought a
Mhm.
lot of high fructose corn syrup. And he made this joke, man, we buy all this high fructose corn syrup so that we can all eat organic. And we kind of all laughed, but that sat with me and I was like, that's really messed up. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's true, right? Now, someone that's deciding to drink alcohol and deciding to drink Four Locos is probably not worried about that. And so it is definitely a different mindset. But for me, as my life had evolved, I was married, I had two kids at the time, like it was important at that
Yeah.
moment. And as you mentioned, Melanie was very she didn't start this way. We've been together since we were in college, right? But she's grown very much in her food journey specifically, and she's very much the protector of our household. She's on the forefront of what's affecting us, and she blocks anything from getting into our house. And so the little bit deeper backstory on it is I was investing in better for you brands at the time, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I invested in this small startup called Raw Nature 5, which was essentially Koia 1.0. And it was in about 20 stores in Chicago. And that was all it was intended to be. At that same time, when Maddox, my second son, was born, we didn't know it at the time, but he was dairy intolerant. He was having all these digestion issues. And
Mm.
so Melanie, doing what she does, dug in deep, figured that out, and we became a dairy free household. And so this is back in 2014, I guess, uh, 2014. And so at that time, dairy free meant soy milk. There weren't all these other
Yeah.
alternatives, right? And so when I really started to think about what Raw Nature 5 was doing and the role it was playing, it got really exciting to me because I was like, I'm an Ohio guy. I'm in Chicago at the time. Taste matters. To get to the mainstream population, you have to make it taste good because they all want to be better, but they will not sacrifice that, right? It's just a
Mhm.
reality. Um, and this checked all those boxes. And the long story short is the company was on the verge of insolvency. I came in and invested it, took control of it, and we pivoted and launched Koia in 2014. But I'll fast forward, we're 8, 9, I guess almost 10 years into this thing now, and we're still growing. We are, next week, we'll be announcing that we're launching a Koia Kids line.
Oh,
And
amazing.
yeah, super exciting. It's based in
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's based in our own house. Of course, the kids drink koi at our
Yeah.
house, but I find half drink bottles everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I said, let's make something that's more specific to kids. And so with Melanie's input, I had to make sure that it was going to be allowed in our house, first of all, right? So can't make something that's not even allowed in our own house.
Melanie approved.
Melanie approved, right? We also worked with a registered dietitian. Melanie's a nutrition, holistic nutritionalist, and so we got both sides of that spectrum. But we did some really groundbreaking stuff where we got rid of the top 9 allergens in this drink, so it's kind of school friendly.
I love this.
And then we went deeper. We snuck in some fruits and vegetables, so parents will love that. Kids won't even know. Um, we went organic on this line, and then going deeper into it, we're the first product to not have inflammatory seed oils as the base, like
I'm
in protein,
loving this.
right?
Oh my
Yeah, so
God.
avocado oil replaces the high oleic sunflower oil, and then going even a level deeper, not to bore you too much, but there are genetic defects that a lot of the population have. I have one of them. It's called the MTHFR defect.
Okay.
And Gary Brecka talks about it. It's a very popular topic right now. What that means is you can't process certain things. 40% of the population has this. And one of the things they can't process is certain forms of B12 vitamins that are pretty
Yeah.
ubiquitous. So, as an example, Celsius and plenty of other drinks have cyanocobalamin B12 in it, but I have the methylation defect, and so do my kids, and so we can't
Mhm.
have that. It won't make it in our house. So
Yeah.
we used a better form called methylcobalamin. Same thing with folate versus folic acid. We use methylfolate, and so we really optimize this thing around our own personal, you know, um, view
Yeah.
and needs, and that's kind of how Koia is run to this day.
Wow, that is so exciting and congratulations. Like, I can't wait for that to be out because that will be in my kids. I'm packing lunches right now, so it's really hard to like find that balance that kids like one, it's delicious, two, they'll actually drink it. And
Yeah,
three, it's just loaded with everything that they need, even if they don't know what's in it. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So here you are, super successful in the beverage industry and you go and decide to write a book. Now, writing a book is no easy task. And it's nonfiction, it's a memoir. So you are taking vulnerability to an entirely new level. What inspired you to go into the author realm of life?
Call me crazy. I fought it for a while. I had been casually told throughout time, like when people would hear about Four Loko or other things, oh, you should write a book. But I never took that really to heart. I remember it was in early 2020, and I was talking with somebody who was sharing something they were struggling with, and I
Mhm.
just shared one of my stories, and they said you should really write a book because your story helped me, and that was a completely different context for me. It was like if I can write something that can and share something, and
Yeah,
it's not ego driven about me being me or me being whatever visible, but it's about the story helping somebody, well, I can get behind that. And so I started on this 4 year journey of writing this book where I was just sharing stories and trying to understand what the flow would be and how it would come out. And I struggled at times with like how vulnerable do I want to be? At some point,
yeah,
my kids are gonna read this
yeah,
book, and ultimately, I came to the conclusion that I don't want my kids to think I'm perfect. I don't want them to think I'm a superhero. I don't want to crush them later in life when they find out that's not true, anyways. And so I might as well start with being honest with them now. Now, in full transparency, my kids are not allowed to read the book until they're 16. But that kind of got me there. And look, I don't know if it'll ever make money. That wasn't the intention of it. The intention was to get it out there. And within the first week, I had somebody, send me a text that said, man, I haven't talked to my dad in 8 years. I read your book. I'm rethinking that. I appreciate your sharing, and I'm going to rekindle my relationship. And I was like, mission accomplished, right? So
wow.
that's what propelled me into it.
Well, that's amazing because, a lot of times when people have that inner inkling or voice telling them to write or share their story, people honestly don't go into writing a book and becoming an author to make money. That is like such a rare thing. But, our stories really do connect us. And by you sharing your story and connecting with others and helping them feel seen and inspiring them to possibly make some life-changing choices, that's got to feel pretty damn good.
Yeah, it does. It's still scary. I remember when the first person from school told me or Melanie that they bought the book, and I was like, oh man, here we go. It's a total exposure, but hey, it's out there. I am who I am.
So can you tell us a little bit about Blackout Punch? Like, what does the title mean? And can you give us a little bit of like background into your story that you had to go vulnerable on and maybe sort of produce some like fears or emotions that made you uncomfortable?
Yeah. So the title is multifaceted. So, at its peak, Four Loko was called Blackout in a Can. That was like the nickname for it, right? And so the blackout thing clearly made sense. Our first flavor of Four Loko was fruit punch. So the punch thing clearly made sense. But if you go a level deeper, because it's my story, it's not the Four Loko story, it was
Hmm.
really about like I had by some standards, a rough upbringing, right? My mom went into addiction when I was 12 years old, much before that, but into her first official treatment program. My parents were 18 when I was born. They were immediately divorced. There were a lot of different things that happened that I got really good at compartmentalizing things in life and essentially blacking out parts of my
Yeah.
history. And then, I grew up a fighter in every way, right? You're scrappy in the town that you're in, but I also boxed and unfortunately got in plenty of street fights and all that good stuff too. And so the name just resonated with me. And it was actually through a conversation with someone down here that I came up with the subtitle, which was From Chaos to Clarity, because, one of the stories in the book is about me ending up in Peru and doing an ayahuasca journey, and really starting to understand myself and how I show up in the world better, which really transformed Melanie and I's relationship. So some of the things that I was, let's see, nervous about sharing, I mean, being vulnerable, even about your upbringing, like about my mom's situation or
Yeah.
things that I had gone through around that was a little bit scary, although I feel like I've been pretty candid about that. Um, there was a time where I sold drugs. I was like, I don't really want to
Yeah.
share that or my kids to see that, but it's a reality of who I was and the options I had at that time. I would say the hardest part, which was probably the biggest blessing, was I had kind of lost myself and missed transitions in life at different times. And one of the biggest ones that I missed was getting married. And when Melanie and I got married, we were very much in love. We are still very much in love, but I just was still like not sure what that meant in terms of
Hmm.
life. And so there was a stretch where I was not being the best husband. And ultimately, when I went and did ayahuasca, I saw this like treasure chest that was chained up, in this dark place inside of me. And I knew exactly what was in it, but there was no chance in hell I was ever revealing that. And I would say 2 years later, Melanie and I are talking. We're having a very candid conversation, probably one of the most honest conversations I've had with anybody ever in my
Yeah.
life. And I revealed to her that I had been unfaithful. And, that's a really tough thing to introduce into a marriage. It shattered her perception of our world, and rightfully so, right?
Hmm.
I think one of the things that salvaged that was it wasn't something that I was caught doing. I decided to come
Yeah.
forth because I wanted to wipe the slate clean. And I tell you, as difficult as it was, it's been one of the most amazing things because we literally got to go through the process of like being very honest and candid with each other, and then having the discussion again of like, do we still choose each other?
Yeah.
And a lot of that weight was in her court at that time, and we ultimately decided yes, and so that was really
Yeah.
scary, not only to write about but also to go through. So
Yeah. Wow, thank you for your vulnerability. And, I have to say, like, no matter what it is with everyone listening, like, it feels pretty damn good, like, to say something that's so terrifying, to just say it out loud, to
yeah,
literally just release it and stop carrying it. Not that you stop carrying it, but just that it's almost like a secret. It's suffocating. It's like really carrying our suffering. And I bet it felt pretty damn good just to say it out loud. One.
yeah. I mean, look, it's again, through my upbringing, I've been able to shut off a lot of things,
Yeah.
and empathetic empathy to others has been one of those. And it was
Yeah.
really devastating to me to realize the impact I had on somebody else because of my bad short-term decisions. But that
Yeah.
was a really good growth opportunity for me and for us together. So while it felt good to offload it, it
Yeah.
felt really shitty for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it came back to even better than before.
Yeah,
So
because now you're living in truth. You're living in complete truth. And I mean, I think that is like the foundation of all marriages, that you're just living on a basis of truth, whether it's ugly or pretty or whatever, it's the truth. So I feel
yeah.
like it's so freeing to live in that light, in that truth, no
And
matter.
not only that, but I think to feel like I never felt like I could be completely honest with anyone
Yeah.
ever until now, where I'm like, man, that was the probably the hardest thing I could ever say. And if I was able to be honest about that, and I think it freed her up to be honest with me too, like
Yeah.
stuff that you may be embarrassed about or like concerned about how someone's going to judge you. But now we know, like, unconditionally, no matter
Yeah.
what you say, share, do, whatever, there's that love and connection. And that's pretty liberating.
That's pretty liberating. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Would you recommend ayahuasca? What made you do ayahuasca? You found yourself in Peru. How do you find yourself in Peru?
So it's a very serendipitous moment. I think you find yourself in some of these places by simply paying attention, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I was a bit lost after Four Loko, and I was wondering what I was going to do, and I was just really trying to get myself out there to ask people or to pay attention to what options there even were. And I was at this event in Utah, And I was getting comfortable sharing my story, being vulnerable about the fact that I was fired and whatever. And I had spoken with this one guy who I found out had a similar situation and asked him what he did. And he was single at the time. He said, "Oh, I traveled the world for 3 months and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Oh, great. But I'm married with kids. That's not going to happen." Although Melanie was supportive of me doing the trip on my own. But he did say, "I did this. I did Ibogaine," which I didn't even know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was at this event in Utah and I was talking to another person. And right at the moment that he and I were chatting, this guy said, "Well, what are you going to do next?" I happened to get a text and I pulled out my phone, and it was the first guy, his name was Matt, texting me the contact information for someone that he recommended to go on this ayahuasca journey with. And I looked at this other guy, his name was Chris, and I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do next. Have you ever been to Peru or done ayahuasca?" And his eyes lit up. Again, I didn't even know what ayahuasca was. His
Yeah.
eyes lit up and he said, "I just did it last year. It changed my life. You got to do it, blah, blah, blah." He goes on and on. He said, "I did it with this group and it's like by invite only, but unfortunately they're already full. So, whatever." And I said, "Okay, great." In my
Yeah.
pocket, mentally note it. Later that night at the event, he comes up to me and he's like, "You'll never believe this. One of my good friends from New York was supposed to go on the trip. He can't go. There's a spot." And so I
Giving
ended
me
up
chills.
talking. Yeah. So I ended up talking with the guy who kind of puts the trip together. It was 10 entrepreneurs, all men from around the world, and want to make sure that you fit with the group because it's a pretty, vulnerable experience. And he said, "Hey, if you can make it in 3 weeks, you're in."
Yeah.
And that's how I found myself there.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I've always been
Yeah.
curious about it. One day, I think it would just be the ultimate like peek into, your healing journey, like things that, we just don't want to look at possibly.
For sure. And you asked if I would recommend it. I would only recommend it for somebody who feels like they're called to it and really interested. I mean, it's definitely an intense and can be scary, process.
Hmm.
The other thing is that I would highly recommend if anyone decides to do it, that they really do it with intention and follow the dieta leading up to it and just take it serious. There are things that can disrupt that process. I think the experience itself is part of it, but integration with somebody who is there to kind of like guide you through it is just as important. So I was surprised when I went to Peru to see that there were almost like nightclubs that you just pop in and do ayahuasca. Like I would not
Yeah.
recommend that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so building brands, writing books. Let's shift to parenting. Like, how do you balance being an entrepreneur, writing a book, and being a present dad? Because you are a rock star dad. You got you and your family, like you guys are in it to win it. You are hardworking, you are present. I mean, how do you balance this? Any strategies that work well that you're willing to share?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it, and I think at times I feel better about it than others. It's just
Yeah.
always just like everything else, day in and day out. I'm trying to balance it. I would tell you one of the most transformative things that we ever did was started doing, as you know, we have 3 children. And so when
Hmm.
we started to do one-on-one dates with our kids, it was eye-opening. It was so
Wow.
amazing. And I had read this book, really short book called Family Board Meetings. And the idea was these people would go out and surf with their kids, and then they'd spend a few hours, no electronics. And the point being, you spend focused time to think about your businesses, but do we do that with our life? And so that was the inspiration for me to start doing, and Melanie also to start doing one-on-one dates with our kids. And we try to calendar them at the beginning of the year. We try to stick to them. That was really transformative. I think the other thing for me is I feel like at least my kids, but I think many kids also want to be treated like people, not like
Yeah.
kids. They want
Yeah.
to they want to be heard. They want to be respected. And as parents, that doesn't mean we do what they say, but
Yeah.
I give them the respect of like, you have to show me respect. Don't interrupt me. Be patient. Say excuse me, and then I'll show you the respect by really listening and considering what you're saying. I
Hmm.
think that's gone a long way. There's plenty that we do wrong as well, but I think those are two things that stand out in my mind.
That's amazing. Well, there's no perfectionism in parenting. And I think when we own our mistakes or we own our wrongdoings, it's also just teaching our kids how to be resilient and that mistakes, make us stronger and make us smarter. And I think that's good parenting.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, you guys, I've been to your house before. I mean, you guys are really into like wellness, and I would love to see if you could share some of like your self-care routines because running businesses, being a parent of three children, balancing it all has to be stressful. It's stressful just being a parent alone. So
Yeah.
how do you manage your like stress and wellness? What are some things that you incorporate on a daily routine or weekly?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a place and with a family where it was very much like diet culture, like, oh, I'm going to eat this way for a certain time and then I can eat how I want. And I think one of the biggest things for us has been just changing what even makes it into our house. I'm as guilty as anybody of stress eating or unconsciously eating, but
Yeah.
fortunately, what's in the pantry is not junk. So, I mean, there's a little bit, but like, is not really junk. And so I find myself snacking unconsciously on pecans rather than potato chips or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. And again, we're not perfect, but I think that's a big one is just like gut the house of things that are just not healthy for you. The other one is understanding yourself. I mean, we've done genetic testing. I do quarterly blood work and like everyone's different. And I was mentioning the MTHFR, like
Hmm.
defect, like if I didn't know that, I could be eating things that were perceived as healthy that just aren't healthy for me. So understanding yourself, and that dictates the supplements I take and the things that I do. I know that genetically, the highest risk for me is cardiac issues, and so therefore I choose to prioritize the sauna or other things like that that are good for your cardiac health. And then I found that anger still creeps up.
Yeah.
Sometimes often, sometimes infrequently, but now I know how to go relieve that better, right? When I was younger, that might have meant a street fight or getting annihilated by drinking or all these
Yeah.
other things. And now I'm like, let me go kick my own ass boxing or with some intense workout or whatever it may be, right? I turn on angry music and I just let it all out. And I think finding healthy expressions
Hmm.
is really important. I think being aligned with your partner, like Melanie pushes me in different ways, right? I pushed her to get into the ice bath and she hates cold water. When she was in a bad mood one day and she was exposed to it, she pushed me into meditating, right? She's really deep into that. And so
Yeah.
um, just kind of being aligned and supporting, situation with your partner, I think really helps too. I don't know. It's just I know that I'm better and I feel better when I take care of myself, and when I don't, um, I don't always like how I'm showing up. So
That's amazing. Those are some great tips. And you guys really do complement each other as partners. Um, I don't know. I love that. I think that's what makes it, you guys are just really balanced and you're motivated and you're honest. So I think you guys really complement each other as partners. And I feel like that just pretty much makes you guys successful throughout all aspects of your life, especially in your parenting. So to end, if you could give advice to any, aspiring entrepreneur who might be struggling with getting started or is facing challenges and setbacks now, what would you leave everyone with?
I mean, I think there's a few different tidbits that I think people always struggle with. One is I love the idea of learning on someone else's dime. Like if you really want to get into an
Oh,
industry
that's
that's
a
new
good
to
one.
you, go get a
Yeah.
job in that industry. Go get an I mean, even as an adult, go get an internship in that industry, whatever it takes to like learn the industry on someone else's dime. Because no matter what you do, I mean, I launched my third beverage with Koia, and I was still learning a lot of new stuff, right? So you're always going to have a learning curve. I think the second is you mentioned this earlier about parenting, but it definitely applies to business. Is don't seek perfection because and paralysis by analysis is the worst thing I think possible. Like get far enough in the plan to get a product or get a company out there and adapt. Like
Yeah.
it's never going to be right no matter what, and you're always going to be shifting. And so just get going, just do something to get started. I think those are the two that resonate the most.
That's awesome, Chris. I really want to thank you today for your vulnerability, for your time, for saying so many important things out loud. I think, using your voice and showing that vulnerability really is a strength and not a weakness is really inspiring for everyone listening today. I encourage everyone to try Koia. It's absolutely delicious. I am so excited for the kids line to launch because that will become an integral part of my feeding routine. And pick up his book, Blackout Punch, on Amazon. I highly recommend the read. Thank
Thank
you
you so
so much.
much.
Thank you for
Yeah,
joining us.
it's great to talk.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Surviving Roots. Let's continue this conversation as a community. For more updates about the show, remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. Also, there will be some special bonus footage from the show on Instagram at carrie.fund. I'll see you there.